Hey guys, I'm back, and I'm back with my Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny ticket. I have a lot to cover in this video, so let's get to it. The title of this video indicates praise, and yes, I absolutely loved this film. Now, firstly, there's a couple things I want to cover. One are the toxic videos that I have been seeing all over YouTube before anyone gave it a chance in the theaters. There are videos that are complaining about a woke character. There's been videos saying that Indiana Jones has always been bad. There are videos that are saying Spielberg, please come back. There's videos that are saying Indiana Jones go back into the museum. There's videos that are saying Harrison Ford, please go away. It's endless. It's stupid. And it's just another symptom of people just using the internet to spread hate. Did anyone understand a single thing about what Star Wars was about? If you really want to check out something very interesting that is fact-based, look at the amount of hate that is spread on the internet. But anyway, that's a whole other video. So the hate actually does lead to interesting points I want to make. Firstly, Kathleen Kennedy is a friend of George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Frank Marshall. She isn't going anywhere. They wanted a friend in charge of Lucasfilm. Secondly, the film The Last Crusade doesn't make it the last Indiana Jones film. Emphasis on the word crusade. Did anybody understand what the Crusades were and that the movie was about the Crusades? Thirdly, true, there is a sunset at the end of The Last Crusade, but that was probably Spielberg's sunset. As a director, he probably wasn't planning to come back to direct Indiana Jones, but George Lucas had already made it clear that he was going to keep Indiana Jones going. He originally wanted River Phoenix to be in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, but that didn't work out, unfortunately, in tragic fashion. But one of the things that the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, if anyone has ever seen them, if you're a true Indiana Jones fan, is it's about history. And that is the point. Finger pointing again. History. Indiana Jones is about history. If Star Wars is about mythology, then Star Wars is about history for George Lucas. At the very beginning, if Raiders of the Lost Ark were successful, Paramount had slated in contract that there would be 4 sequels. So Harrison Ford always remembered that there was going to be 4 sequels, 5 films in total. Him being in the Mystery of the Blues episode of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles seems like a bonus, and obviously he got paid for that. So 4 Indiana Jones sequels was something he always knew he was going to do. It always seemed to be in the back of his mind. If you look at lots of interviews, even before Crystal Skull, he was thinking about one of these 2 Indiana Jones films going to be made. George Lucas, when he came up with the idea of Indiana Jones, always loved films like Secret of the Incas and Gunga Din. Spielberg always thought of Indiana Jones as like Casablanca or Sullivan's Travels in terms of physical comedy and the characters going through horrendous damage and pain. So somewhere in there, in that brew of things, came up Indiana Jones. Clearly also the movie Nevada Smith had something to do with the name Indiana Jones. After Raiders of the Lost Ark, which he came up with Philip Kaufman, the original director for Raiders, Spielberg eventually took over, there was always a thuggy film in the spirit of Gunga Din, and then a haunted castle concept that eventually got reworked into The Last Crusade, and then his Saucer Men from Mars idea. But those are basically the 4 concepts that George Lucas had come up with. Lucas has also gone on to say, and you can find it on Wikipedia, that Indiana Jones was always supposed to be rooted in some kind of history or archaeological fact. In many ways, that's why The Last Crusade became what it was. For Spielberg, The Last Crusade became more of a father-son story, and George Lucas always focused on the MacGuffin. In Alfred Hitchcock's case, that always involved what motivates the plot. It may not be super important to the plot, but it gets things moving. In the case of the villains, it's what motivates them to quest for this mystical object. Personally, I like Kingdom of Crystal Skull more than Temple of Doom, because every time I watch Temple of Doom, I keep wondering, why did they make this movie without asking the Indian government if they liked what this movie was about? When Cubby Broccoli did Octopussy, which was a reaction to Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Indians loved that film. It didn't do anything that they felt was offensive to their culture. But when they filmed in Sri Lanka instead, as kind of a sidestep to make it about India, just like their nearest neighbor, and then put all these things in Temple of Doom that are kind of culturally insensitive or stereotypical as F, you kind of go, well, I don't know, maybe that wasn't the best idea. Don't get me wrong, it's a very entertaining film. I love watching that movie and laughing a lot at it, but it's not my favorite. Raiders is my favorite, as it is for most people. But Dial of Destiny is kind of getting up there in the love factor for me. I really loved the emotional elements to this film. It was really great to see Sala. It was really great to see in Indiana Jones's apartment objects from previous films. I really liked seeing Marion. I liked hearing the John Williams themes that we've heard previously. There was a really good explanation about what happened to Mud that actually made me a little teary-eyed, because if anybody understands the history of the Vietnam War, that was a very, very controversial, bloody war. And it's actually interesting to see Indiana Jones not being too fond of that war. The other thing was that I accidentally predicted something that this movie was about, which was corrupt CIA agents. There is a true piece of controversial history called Operation Paperclip, in which the US used former Nazis for some of their scientific endeavors, like NASA. That is actually true, you can look that up. And the CIA were also involved in covering up a number of things in Vietnam around the same time. That is something you can see in Spielberg's The Post. But I think one of the other things that I really liked about this film was that you can kind of tell what the year was without seeing the titles. Like, I think director James Mangold was interested in showing iconography that made you go, oh, I know what year this is, I know what date this is. Because the Spielberg films and in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, they use titles to tell you what the location is in the year. Spielberg really liked that idea, but you don't actually see any years and location titles, which makes me a little sad, but that's more of a style aesthetic thing. The same thing goes for the Mountain Dissolve. I really was looking forward to a Mountain Dissolve, but Paramount is just so iffy about changing their new logos ever since Viacom took over. I think they begrudgingly used the Hitchcock in VistaVision era Paramount logo for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It actually occurred to me that the burlap sack on top of Indy's head might actually be the mountain that was supposed to dissolve from the Paramount logo to that sack. But because it's Disney's 100th anniversary and Paramount decided, no, we're not changing our logo. So you don't quite get that. You get a very quick, okay, the movie's starting. The movie gets going really quick. Mangold really took Spielberg's advice to make it feel like it's a trailer. According to Wikipedia, it looks like they went with George's very vague idea of a time machine, but they still rooted it in something that was based on a real object. So it's kind of like a little bit of a science fiction angle, but it also feels like, oh wow, this is something that maybe one day science will be able to explain a similar event with Aurora Borealis or UAPs. You know, that's the stuff that's going on right now, and movies like to kind of make a commentary on what's going on these days. So the thing about using Nazis as the villain, that might be one of the elements is why Spielberg didn't want to direct this film, because he once went on record that ever since he did Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, he wasn't interested in lampooning the Nazis anymore. He made Crystal Skull with the Russians as the villains. That's why I assumed that they might have corrupt CIA agents or darker, morally gray CIA agents, FBI agents, something that was like a thread in the earlier Frank Darabont scripts for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, or earlier when it was Saucermen from Mars, but they put the Nazis back in probably to give it that same level of conflict and pathos that you got in Raiders, which is, holy crud, the Nazis have discovered Tanis, this could be really bad if Hitler gets any of these items, antiquities that may have some kind of power that is unexplainable to help him win the war. And that is kind of what is going on, is that Mads Mikkelsen's character, Jürgen Voller, is someone that wants to study these objects and help win the war, but he realizes that Hitler's insane, and that's one of the main reasons that the Nazis lost. They spent way too many resources to access powers, and they lost badly. Anyone who uses hate as a campaign loses badly. It's happened throughout history. Arnold Schwarzenegger made a video about this, you can look it up. But there's a lot of really cool things going for the film. I really like the locations of being able to go to Greece and Italy. It's really nice to see 1944 Germany. You knew it was 1944 Germany D-Day when you saw the paratroopers descending on the train. You know it's August 13th, 1969, because that's the day the three astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, had the New York parade. When India's woken up by Beatles music, they're listening to a recording of the January Get Back on the Apple building. Those poor Beatles fans, they have absolutely no idea John Lennon is going to leave the Beatles soon, and it's all going to go downhill in September 1969 for them. Interestingly enough, the trailer used Rolling Stones music instead. But the movie is mostly about what it means for Indiana Jones to be older, and how does this man really reevaluate his life. Is he successful? Did he actually accomplish anything in his life? Did he run away too much, considering he's done this now 3 times to Marion? I like seeing Indiana Jones also take a moment to look at people who have died because of collateral damage that he may have caused. He doesn't seem to think about that much when he's young. And in fact, in the prologue, he doesn't seem to be too aware of the amount of damage he's causing. Because for him, World War II, that era, it was very clear who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. But in 1969, everything looks kind of gray. Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character of Helena Shaw is very interesting. You can see a lot of her appeal from Fleabag going on, but she feels like a great 1930s snappy Katharine Hepburn character. Anybody who says that she's woke, I don't know what they're talking about. This character feels old school as far as I'm concerned. She feels like a character from Bringing Up Baby, or feels like Anne Sheridan's character. So when I see anybody that's basically saying she's annoying, I think the point is that she's annoying. George Lucas loves annoying characters. They're all over Star Wars. Even American Graffiti has annoying characters. I do like the Teddy character. He kind of feels like the kid's sidekick equivalent of Short Round and Mutt Williams. It's interesting to note that in 3 of the 5 Indiana Jones films, Indy technically has a kid's sidekick, whether he wants them there or not. A lot of people are a little sad that Antonio Banderas didn't have very many scenes, but I can kind of see why, because it's supposed to shock you in a way that Janet Leigh dying in Psycho shocks you. Like, whoa, that's a famous guy! I hope I didn't give too much away with that one. But let's talk about John Williams' music. The maestro, 91 years old, he still got it. I can't believe the fact that this guy is still kicking ass in his 90s. It's kind of the whole point of the movie. What are you doing in your 30s? I'm in my 30s and I hope I'm kicking ass, but sometimes I just get tired and I have to go to sleep too, like most people. But the movie kind of motivates you to want to make a review like this one right now, because it really got my creative juices flowing, and that might be the best thing about filmmaking. As a filmmaker myself, I typically watch movies because I want to see what the director did. I want to see a different take. With James Bond films, you might get a director who directs 2 in a row, or one guy directs 1 film, or somebody comes back. You don't have that luxury with Indiana Jones with only 5 films, because Spielberg did most of it. Carl Schultz is the only other example besides James Mangold, who directed Harrison Ford in Young Indiana Jones and the Mystery of the Blues. I will end it up with saying, don't listen to the haters, make up your own mind. I think kids will enjoy this film. It's not as gory as previous Indiana Jones films. I think that changed, the world has changed, and people just have gotten a lot more freaked out that in the 1980s they were able to get away with stuff like that. I suppose Kevin Feige right now is pushing the barrier with the F-bombs and some of the more body horror that we just saw in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, directed by James Gunn. I'm hoping that we will avoid the toxic fandom. This is not about some kind of scripture. This is not about satisfying some kind of headcanon, some kind of movie in your head that you want this 5th Indiana Jones film to be, that you want Star Wars to be, that you want an MCU film to be, that you want a Batman film to be, that you want a Superman film to be. That's not what these career filmmakers are trying to do. They hire career filmmakers who have done lots of different kinds of movies, and they learn from their previous mistakes, hopefully, and they're hired because they understand writing or they understand directing, and actors are hired because they've done lots of other kinds of projects. So, for example, the Butterworths, Jez Butterworth wrote Spectre, and he also wrote Edge of Tomorrow, and I really like those projects. Spectre, I can kind of see the problems with that film is that certain elements of the villain, Blofeld, got glossed over, but they did just enough to understand that these are references and there's mystique involved. Indiana Jones doesn't really have the luxury of mystique, which is really strange, because the archaeological element to it is always about uncovering the truth. You don't have to uncover the truth with Bond. Bond always seems to be unofficially competing with Indiana Jones, but it doesn't have to. In fact, Dial of Destiny kind of puts that whole subject to bed. We don't need to compete with Bond. Bond has the advantage that the actors constantly keep changing over the years, and that revitalizes that universe. But Indiana Jones has the luxury that Bond doesn't have, which is Indiana Jones is allowed to get older. Harrison Ford always saw this part as a real guy surviving history. And that's the point. Indiana Jones survives history. So when you watch the film, it's kind of like, well, this is Indiana Jones surviving the 60s. It's good to know that people still love him and they love this character. In fact, that's kind of the point. When the vignette gets smaller and smaller around that eye that basically is a wink, except with a certain kind of iconography, that's when you know, okay, I think we've done a pretty good job saying this is a happy ending. It didn't have to be a sunset. If you want it to be a sunset, you can watch those first 3 films. I think it's more of a sunset for Henry Jones Sr. and Marcus Brody. But this feels more like the sunset that Harrison Ford wanted. And give the guy some credit. He's had an amazing career as an actor. He's done some amazing projects. He's definitely worked with some of the greatest directors of all time. And that doesn't even include Spielberg or Lucas or Mangold. We're talking about people that he has said in various videos over the years. So I think come in with a pretty neutral set of expectations. I like the film because I just want to be surprised and want it to go into different directions, because who wants to watch the same thing over and over again? Insane people. If you want to be cynical, the movie business is a business, and making all your clickbait is a business. But we're here to talk about creativity, and if you're going to argue about creativity, none of this clickbait is creative, except in your minds. And speaking of creativity, I think Harrison Ford is the biggest fan of Indiana Jones more than anybody that watches him as Indiana Jones. And what I mean by that is the creativity the character offers him. He can ride horses, he can do tricks with a bullwhip, he gets to fake punch bad guys of all sorts of historical villainy, and he gets to use a huge range of emotions that he loves to do, which is screaming and crying a little bit, and exhibiting his remarkable talent of showing physical pain on his face. Speaking of the deep fake technology used to de-age Harrison Ford, they did a pretty good job considering the resolution it requires to make that look as photorealistic as possible. As Harrison has said, it is not photoshopped. They didn't smooth away wrinkles. They actually used his face from 40 years of Lucasfilm footage in the archives from American Graffiti on. People are not talking about Mads Mikkelsen's deepfake enough. I think they did a really good job with him to make him look like he's in his late 20s, early 30s. But I think the best deepfake scene is actually when Toby Jones, who does a great job in the film, by the way, as Basil Shaw, is talking to a 50-year-old Indiana Jones in 1951, something that's supposed to take place after the Mystery of the Blues Snowy Adventure segments. And he looks like he just filmed The Fugitive in the same suit, and here he is doing this scene. It looks great. That's probably the best deepfake scene in the entire film. And so let's just give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm pretty sure that old and young fans will like it if they just see it for what it is. A True Grit, 1969. One more finger pointing.